Hello, welcome back to Scriptural Analysis, the Law of the Covenant. This is video 3, part 7, the Abrahamic Covenant. The purpose of this video will be to comment on the story given in the previous video, which was part 6, about Abraham's life, and teach the viewer the importance of proper analysis when reading such stories. But first, was Abraham slain on the altar? Of course not. Written history informs us that Jehovah saved Abraham before the priest could slay him. In fact, the writings recorded in a book called The Pearl of Great Price describe that Jehovah smote that false priest who delighted in promoting a man-made structure classified as a religion. And Jehovah further destroyed all the altars in the entire region, straight through to the land of Egypt. The destruction of altars caused the whole society to mourn, and surely word would have got out that Abraham was at the center of this great destruction. For a testament of divine protection under the promises of P cubed, however, this was a good one for the people honoring the covenant in that day, as Abraham, who knew God, was protected by a servant of God that appeared from behind the veil and exerted righteous dominion over the kingdom of Nimrod. So now that cliffhanger has been dealt with, let's pause here for a moment and discuss this written work. This story, as told from the book of Jasher, represents just that, a story. As we were not there to confirm it, we need to analyze the structure of the literary work to ascertain whether or not there is a consistent pattern of governance from God and a consistent pattern of behavior from those accepting God's governance. Within that writing, however, the reader can find many inconsistencies. For example, the chapter starts with the statement that Abraham knew God, and then, later in the writings, it suggests that Abraham wondered if the idols would reach for the food and accept him. So it could be argued that if Abraham knew the Lord, he would not waste his time, as the story suggests. But it is exactly this type of focus on written work that gives rise to many different religions created by humanity. With every opinion about the characters of the written histories, their traditions of their progenitors, their laws of the day, their way of life, the food they would or would not eat, their customs that they followed, and so forth. Humanity would create divisions amongst themselves and create a new type of God better suited to their philosophies, and thus a new religion. So the objective for these videos is to redirect the focus of the written works towards piecing together and understanding God's governance within the literary work, and shine a light on the author's written patterns to understand what God is doing during any specific time period of the histories provided. In other words, regardless of the character described in any chapter, what she or he did or did not do, how they lived, what laws they followed, the analysis should be to simplify the author's work to understand the law of the covenant or the doctrines of God that recorded in the story for that time, to qualify for P cubed, and then test this doctrine out for consistency throughout the entire timeline. Then, having firstly identified God's governance, the reader can secondly analyze the characters and determine what happens to them as they choose to act in the ways that they do, either within the terms of the covenant or outside of these terms. Without this focus, these works could easily fall into the often stated cycle that history becomes legend, and legend becomes myth, and myth becomes superstitious fables for weak-minded people. And although many individuals would suggest that the King James Version of the Holy Bible is indeed a fairy tale for weak-minded people, these types of readers or non-readers have completely missed the reality of the author's message. The author's works are wasted upon those who cannot analyze the governance message that is included. In fact, when the reader does focus on God's governance instead of the story itself, and analyzes the literary work to identify what God is doing, why God is doing that, how God is doing it, and to what level of people these things are happening to, then the entire volume of writing becomes consistent with the doctrines of God through the law of the covenant. Each and every written history provided within the book identifies this consistent reality and is the purpose the written work has made it into the book. The powerful literary message of the authors is this: what God has done in the past concerning those who enter into the law of the covenant and those who do not, He will do in the future in a very similar manner. This way, the covenant people will easily discern God's objective in the timeline they live in, and will be able to prepare themselves and their posterity, regardless of the structures of earthly kingdoms on the earth. Let me reiterate that differently. All individuals on the earth who choose to live the terms of the law of the covenant will be able to understand what God's governance is for the timeline they are living in, and will be prepared for what God is going to do with the nations of the world, because they will understand what God has done in the past when societies have chosen to accept or deny covenant terms. As such, all individuals living the terms of the law of the covenant will view the resulting covenant blessings or cursings administered from Jehovah for what they are, and will not react in an unnecessary fashion that can lead to spurious human behavior if situations around them look bleak, covenant cursings, or even if situations are amazing, covenant blessings. If cursings, covenant individuals will seek for the promised divine protection of the past to assist them during worsening conditions in the societies they live in, as the past human cycle of mocking God's law presents itself in their day. This has been the example given by the authors. The promises given of the Abrahamic covenant are eternal, notwithstanding the many circumstances that can exist here on this temporal earth that can be viewed as tremendously hard trials to bear, accidents unexpected, intentional harm, violence, etc. P cubed follows covenant observers always. So earth or heaven, the promises are valid because they emanate from the Creator. So long as it is the Creator's covenant, the authors reiterate over and over the validity of the promise. However, if it is a man-made religion, evident by not coming under the terms of God's complete governance, but offering some form of the same ideology of this promise, well, the authors show how that does not work out too well. So imagine that. The King James Version of the Holy Bible is a history written and compiled for humanity from just one tribe of Israel to help us prepare in our lives by teaching us God's governance strategy so we can see it, know what is happening, and prepare for what is coming. Remember this picture? The Bible has been received because of the tribe of Judah. Within this message from the tribe of Judah, literary evidence provides information that informs the reader that in the future, from that point in history, other writings will come forth from different sources that will involve many other histories and experiences. According to the authors, this will all happen under the governance of God. So if God is directing when these writings do come forth, will it matter what the stories are? Will it matter who acted as God's chosen servant to bring them forth? Or will it matter what part of the earth these records are found in? Of course not. But in order for us as individuals to discern whether these literary records are part of God's governance, it will only matter that the works are all consistent in their literary devices and prove, no matter what point in human history they have been recorded, the same consistent actions for the law of the covenant, and show clearly that what God has done in the past concerning those who enter into the law of the covenant and those who do not, He will do in the future in a very similar manner. Future videos in this covenant series will identify just how the administration of the law of the covenant progresses with humanity in the governance structures of God. So keep watching, because you will be amazed at the author's talents. All writings from God to humanity will indeed meet the test of literary consistency with God's governance. If not, they are just historical writings focusing on a story, a tradition, or a culture. And although they can be of great worth for the development of mankind here on the earth, even providing true accounts of additional secular history, they will not provide consistently inspired covenantal information to assist the reader to learn the doctrines of God. The book of Jasher, in the form we have today, represents this latter type of writing. It is highly entertaining, possibly some even predating the Genesis record, and potentially adds much to the secular worldly history. But it is too inconsistent with God's governance structures to pass the test as a written work pertinent to understanding how God governs and what individuals need to do to enter into God's law. But for those who enjoy reading the scriptures, it is a good read. As an educator for most of my life, I must admit that I am in awe of just how simplistic the governance of God has been in delivering and maintaining the succession of these covenants and doctrines to the history of the human family, according to the accounts provided by the authors. God's governance utilization of literary strategy to inform all humanity through time is really quite genius and amazingly simple. And it is this simplicity that has been a danger to humanity in actually finding it, especially in this 7th millennium century of 2000 AD, where so many idols abound over the whole face of the earth, which compete for the attention of humanity. Imagine, from Adam and Eve forward to today, no matter the circumstances of society overall, whether in the age of riding an animal for transportation in 4000 BC, or in the age of riding a commercial jet in 2000 AD, the literary message can transcend all cultures, all traditions, and all historical times, no matter humanity's circumstances or advancements, then or now. But God must have known very well that time would alter the stories of the written history, as generations would change or remove some of the characters, or even what they did or taught. But the genius is in the fact that the literary word would keep intact the governance structures of God, His covenants, and His doctrines, simply because there are so many histories included, that the removal of some literary structures could not change the holistic approach that God has directed to be written that reveal the pattern to His plan. So where some reader through history who did not understand a chapter or two might remove it from that timeline, the covenants and doctrines of God's governance show up many more times and remain consistent with the many parts of an altered history that remains. Multiple witnesses from multiple histories. So simple, yet so incredibly wise. So regardless of whether Abraham broke the idols or not, that is not what is important. What is important is what was God's plan for that time and that people. And did God use Abraham as his servant to counter the battle against his teachings by Nimrod? If God did do these things, then what covenant terms were utilized in Abraham's timeline? And do these correlate with the rest of the book consistently in the many other histories? Concerning the literary work of the authors of this book, the answer is a most definite yes. As you will begin to realize and see in future videos, the book shows that God has a plan. It is a perfect plan and is based upon covenant law and consistent doctrines. Again, the literary word provided by the authors seeks to instruct us that what God has done in the past concerning those who enter into the law of the covenant and those who do not, He will do in the future in a very similar manner. The previous video 3, part 6, purposely focused on a story from the book of Jasher. Although entertaining, the purpose was to show the viewer just how easy it can be to create an opinion upon a specific written history, character, issue, or behavior, and assist the viewer in understanding how easily these opinions could distract from the message of God's governance. This distraction could then allow two opposing groups debating upon what Abraham really did to go away from each other with differing versions of Abraham's events and why he did what he did, if he did it at all, and then generate a discussion with like-minded individuals to form a new man-made religion based upon their discussions of opinion and lack of understanding. As such, future videos in this series will continue to focus primarily upon God's governance, God's covenants, and God's doctrines, and treat the stories as the mechanism by which God has chosen to teach us about what He is doing. Thanks for tuning in. But before you go, did you manage to catch the very subtle message quietly inserted in this video that states what God has done in the past concerning those who enter into the law of the covenant and those who do not, He will do in the future in a very similar manner? You did? Good. Because I would not have wanted you to miss that one. I look forward to you joining me for video 3, part 8, where I begin to finalize the teachings from the writings about what we can learn from the author's history of Abraham and how it applies to us in God's governance structure. Until next time, take care and contemplate these things.